How does a poor orphan build the most recognizable watch brand in the world? Despite its illustrious history, Rolex's beginnings are shrouded in mystery and secrets. Find out the incredible journey behind this world-renowned brand and learn why Rolexes are so expensive. Let's dive into the rags to riches story of Rolex and uncover the secrets that lie within. Hans Wilsdorf was an innovative and mysterious founder who, despite a life of great tragedy and sorrow, refused to succumb to despair. Born in Germany in 1881 to parents Anna and Jonah Wilsdorf, Hans spent his early childhood filled with love, laughter, and happiness, until tragically both of his parents died within months of each other when he was just 12. His uncles took him in and sent him off to boarding school, where Hans became deeply depressed and isolated. Desperate for an escape, Hans threw himself into his studies, particularly excelling in languages. After graduating, Hans took a job in Switzerland with Kuno Korten, an export company that also manufactured its own pocket watches. This gave Hans the perfect opportunity to understand watch construction and the watchmaking industry. Little did Hans know that this experience would lay the groundwork for his own illustrious watchmaking career. But the road ahead would be a long and arduous one, full of twists and turns, leading to a story of success and ultimately the birth of Rolex. While working in the watchmaker's factory, Hans began to develop a deep admiration for the craftsmanship and artistry that went into creating watches. His seemingly mundane job of winding hundreds of watches each day only bolstered his obsession with perfect watches. When Hans moved to London to take a bigger role at the company, his understanding of the watch industry was further deepened. He learned more about the importance of marketing for a brand's success and what differentiated one watch from the other. Hans was determined to apply the skills he'd acquired, and in 1905, at the age of 24, he decided to venture out on his own and start his own watchmaking firm. He managed to save up some money, and with the help of his brother-in-law Alfred Davis as a co-founder, they established the Wilsdorf and Davis Company. Hans and Alfred began importing watches from Switzerland to sell in the UK. However, wristwatches were not yet as popular as they are today and were mostly seen as women's jewelry. Friends of Hans told him that wristwatches were too delicate and would easily break, and that their small size would result in inaccuracy. Nevertheless, Hans was sure that wristwatches were more convenient and elegant, and he famously declared, "My personal opinion is that pocket watches will almost completely disappear, and that wristwatches will replace them definitively." He was willing to put everything on the line and make one of the largest orders of wristwatches ever booked at the time, betting that wristwatches would become the future of the watch market. Everyone around him thought he was crazy. Even his business partner wasn't sure it was a great idea, but Hans was determined to make it work. He went on a mission to learn from the most renowned watchmakers of the time, and soon enough, he managed to import Swiss-made mechanisms to start producing watches of high quality. However, Hans was aware that quality alone wouldn't be enough to make his watches stand out, and he would need a memorable name to give them recognition. What happened next was somewhat curious. Hans stated that he tried to combine random letters of the alphabet in every possible way, but none of them felt quite right. Then, while he was riding to work one day, a strange whisper reached his ear. The name Rolex. As soon as he heard it, Hans knew it was perfect. He started printing the name on his watches, and very quickly his new wristwatches began to sell well. His brand was becoming associated with quality, and in 1910, Rolex became the first wristwatch to be awarded the Swiss Certificate of Precision. Then, in 1914, the British Kew Observatory awarded a Rolex watch the Class A rating, something no watch of that kind had achieved before. But then, in 1914, the First World War broke out, and it seemed as if Hans's dreams had been shattered. was a time of great change for Rolex. The company had over 60 employees working at its headquarters in London and was successfully exporting its watches to markets all over the world. However, tensions began to rise when Germany became Britain's enemy in the war. Hans, who was of German descent, suddenly found himself under scrutiny for his German name and accent. To make matters worse, the British government imposed a wartime import duty of 33% on all luxury goods. With conflict on the horizon, Hans knew he had to act fast. He decided to move Rolex's headquarters to Switzerland, a neutral country, to avoid any potential issues and the benefit from tax advantages. While many other watch companies struggled to survive during World War I, Rolex thrived. Their wristwatches became a favorite among the military for their reliability and convenience over pocket watches. But it was Hans's marketing instincts that truly propelled the company to new heights. In the 1920s, he began putting his watches on the wrists of explorers, athletes, racers, aviators, and other successful individuals. This created a powerful connection in the minds of consumers between high achievers and the Rolex brand. Hans also understood the value of product placement and ran hundreds of expertly placed ads on the radio and in newspapers decades before his competitors caught on. It was 1926, and Rolex had just created the world's first fully waterproof watch under the name of Oyster. But this wasn't just any ordinary timepiece. It was a revolutionary product that could withstand even the harshest of conditions. And Hans, the marketing genius behind Rolex, knew just how to showcase this incredible invention. He had heard about a woman who was planning to swim across the English Channel, and he saw an opportunity to demonstrate the Oyster's waterproof capabilities. He convinced the woman to wear the watch during her swim, and after over 10 long hours in the cold water, she emerged with the Rolex Oyster completely intact. This incredible feat generated headlines all over the world, cementing Rolex's reputation as a cutting-edge brand. But Hans didn't stop there. He instructed Rolex dealers to display the waterproof Oyster watches in fish tanks in their windows, with real fish swimming around the watch, which inevitably caught the eye of people walking past. One of the most revolutionary moments in Rolex's history happened just 5 years later, when Rolex engineers developed the perpetual rotor, which automatically wound a watch. This was something that had previously been considered impossible, but Rolex had once again pushed the boundaries of what was possible. Hans was determined to ensure that the most popular people in the world wore a Rolex, especially those involved in daring challenges. The first flights to Everest was performed by a crew wearing a Rolex Oyster, and Malcolm Campbell wore a Rolex watch when he set a land speed record in Utah back in 1935. This combined strategy of great marketing mixed with new innovations allowed Rolex to keep expanding and becoming more and more popular. In 1945, on just the 40th anniversary of the company, Rolex released another new model called the Datejust, the world's first automatic watch to feature a date window on its dial. But shortly before the ceremony to announce this new release, tragedy struck. Hans lost his beautiful wife Florence, who passed away due to an illness. Hans was a man who had overcome great adversity in his life. Having been orphaned at a young age, he had learned to rely on himself and had built an empire from the ground up. But life can be cruel. And now, at 63 years old, Hans had been widowed with no children. He was left to contemplate his own mortality and to think about the future of the company that had been his life's work. Hans was a master of watches, but he knew that he was not a master of time. He needed to find a way to ensure that the company he had built would continue to thrive long after he was gone, and so he spent the next few years developing a plan. In 1946, he established the Hans Wilsdorf Foundation and transferred his entire ownership stake in Rolex to the foundation. To this day, the Hans Wilsdorf Foundation maintains full ownership and control of Rolex. As a foundation, it pays no corporation taxes, and a large percentage of its profits go towards charitable causes, including education grants and the training of watchmakers. But it is rumored that not all the money goes towards charitable causes. Because Rolex is owned by a foundation, there are no shareholders and no requirements to disclose its financial activities. This allows Rolex to maintain a very high level of secrecy. So despite being the most well-known watch brand in the world, the company operates in the shadows, and very little is known about its internal affairs. How was the company managed? How much money was the company making? Or where was the company going? And so some might say the foundation is merely a clever way to protect the wealth and power of Rolex and its subsidiaries. Those who worked for the company were met with strict non-disclosure agreements, preventing any and all photography inside the Rolex building. It seemed that Rolex operated from the shadows, making it nearly impossible to critique anything Rolex does, because no one really knows. What we know is that when Hans died in 1960, the company's new owners took up his mantle and worked to continue his legacy. Despite the mystery surrounding Rolex, it continued to thrive long after Hans had passed away. But in the 1970s, the quartz revolution threatened to bring down the mechanical watch industry. Battery-operated watches were more accurate, easier, and cheaper to produce and flooded the market, causing many manufacturers to go bankrupt. Yet Rolex was fine. The question remained, what made Rolex different? Why can they continue to charge so much for their watches? It was 2017, and the auction house was packed with eager buyers and spectators alike. The item up for sale was no ordinary timepiece, but a Daytona Rolex that had once graced the wrist of Hollywood legend Paul Newman. The bidding was intense, with buyers from around the world competing for the chance to own a piece of history. When the gavel finally fell, the winning bid was an astonishing $17.7 million. But why were people willing to spend so much on a watch? After all, even the most entry-level Rolex would set you back thousands of dollars. Well, when you Google this, the answer seems fairly straightforward. It basically says Rolexes are just really well made. However, that's not the whole picture. You don't need to spend tens of thousands of dollars just to get a watch that'll last a long time. For one, a Rolex was not just a watch, it was a status symbol. From rappers on the streets of New York to members of the British royal family, countless icon figures have worn the brand. John F. Kennedy, Winston Churchill, Steve McQueen, Elvis Presley, Martin Luther King, and many more have all been seen sporting a Rolex on their wrists. The level of status associated with the brand was undeniable, thanks in no small part to Rolex's high-visibility marketing strategy. The company sponsored prestigious events that wealthy people watched or attended, such as Wimbledon and Formula One, and paid big stars like Roger Federer millions to endorse their product. But beyond the status symbol, there was also a reason that Rolex watches commanded such high prices. They were just really well made. The craftsmanship and attention to detail that went into each watch were unparalleled, and they were built to last a lifetime. While you certainly don't need to spend millions to get a watch that would stand the test of time, there was no denying that a Rolex was a thing of beauty. A piece of art as much as a timepiece. In the end, it was clear that Rolex was much more than just a watch. It was a statement, a symbol of success, and a work of art all in one. And for those who could afford it, the price was a small one to pay for the privilege of owning a piece of history. Rolex had been in business for many years and had established a reputation for using only the finest materials to create their timepieces. However, some skeptics believed that the company's high prices were simply a result of clever marketing rather than quality materials and workmanship. Their watches were rigorously tested to meet the highest standards, ensuring that they would last a lifetime. Additionally, the company invested heavily in scientific labs to research and create new models. Despite this, a watchmaker who had insider knowledge claimed that a Rolex selling for $7,000 might only cost $700 to make. Other estimates put Rolex's profit margins at up to 20 times the cost of production. The rest of the profits were spent on advertising and sponsorships, which helped to maintain the brand's exclusivity and desirability. Many watch enthusiasts believed that there were other brands that offered higher quality watches at lower prices than Rolex. However, Rolex remained popular with the upper middle class, and it was still considered an affordable luxury item that could be obtained with enough savings. Rumors even circulated that the founder of Rolex, Hans, had once said, "Only great marketing is needed to make a company successful." This statement may have some truth, as Rolex's high prices allowed them to pay influential people to wear their products or sponsor prestigious events, creating even more demand and allowing them to charge even higher prices. In order to maintain its image, Rolex only sells its watches through authorized dealers. You won't find any special offers or discounts because Rolex wants to make sure that their watches are always seen as premium products. In fact, the brand even repurchases old stock from stores to ensure that excess stock isn't sold at discounts. They don't want their products to seem easy to obtain because that would be bad for their brand image. Hans, the founder of Rolex, once realized that they were missing out on a lot of sales from people who couldn't afford a Rolex. But instead of making a cheaper Rolex model, he introduced a separate brand called Tudor. The watches were very similar to Rolex, but they were made under a different brand name. This ensured that Rolex's brand wasn't diluted by making it too accessible and affordable, which would have damaged its position as a status symbol. But that's not all. Rolex artificially creates scarcity for their products. They make about 800,000 to 1 million watches per year, which is way less than the demand for their watches. The reason for the shortages is likely that they deliberately limit the supply to keep the demand high, which allows them to keep pricing high as the wait time can range from 6 months to 3 years. Authorized dealers have sometimes claimed that the company is undersupplying the market to drive the price up and engaging in price fixing worldwide to maintain the value of their watches. Although there are reports that Rolex does not outsource production and it takes a year to produce a single watch, the reality is that some small parts of the watch are outsourced and machines are used at certain stages. This, however, does not compromise the high quality of the Rolex watches, which require a great deal of work and precision. In fact, if Rolex desired to produce more watches, they likely could. However, they choose to create unfulfilled demand and maintain a waiting list, which is not due to the length of time it takes to make each watch, but rather a savvy business strategy. One interesting aspect of Rolex is that it falls under the category of Veblen goods, which defies the typical laws of supply and demand. In the case of most products such as a pint of beer, lower prices typically result in higher demand. If a bar lowered the price of beer to $1 per pint, people would likely flock to purchase more. Conversely, as the price of beer increases, the demand typically decreases. However, Veblen goods like Rolex watches do not follow this pattern. Instead, as the price of a Veblen good increases, so does the demand for it. This is because Veblen goods are often purchased for the purpose of displaying status. If Rolex were to passively lower its prices, there would likely be less demand, as the brand's perceived value would decrease if everyone could afford it. Despite the fact that much of Rolex's value does not stem solely from the quality of the watch, the brand is still highly regarded and sought after due to its rich history and reputation. Rolex watches are known to hold their value and can even increase in value over time, making them a valuable investment. Few other watch brands can boast such long-lasting worth. Interestingly, Rolex was originally designed as a tool watch for practical use rather than a luxury item or collectible. However, through clever marketing and sales tactics, the brand has successfully repositioned itself as a luxury item and one of the most valuable brands in the world. The fact that founder Hans faced significant adversity from an early age makes the success of the Rolex brand all the more impressive. Undoubtedly, the story of Rolex offers valuable business lessons that can benefit all of us. And if you want some more business stories and lessons to inspire you, the story of Louis Vuitton is the perfect video to watch after this one. So hopefully I'll see you there. Thanks for watching. Cheers.